So hi there, ladies and gentlemen. I am going to give you some feedback or show you an example of the 2.2.1 response flow chart. So in that assignment, you are supposed to chart out how a nervous system of a human reacts to seeing a cockroach. You get to decide what your final action is, but in general, the assignment should follow the same pattern. And so I am going to share with you the flowchart that I created and that I am currently inside of right now. And I'm going to show you starting, there we go, that's backwards, but showing up there in that corner, we're going to walk through and I'll explain to you the idea behind the assignment. And yours doesn't have to look exactly like this, but yours should have these requirements. It could have more. You might say it a little bit differently, but the same concept should be demonstrated in however you chose to represent your decision-making process. So, starting over the cockroach, we see the cockroach, but we only see the cockroach because light bounces off of that cockroach and then comes into our eye. Our eye, sometimes assisted with glass or plastic, focuses light on the retina, which are actually dendrites of a sensory neuron. Our eye doesn't see anything. Our eye doesn't interpret or understand anything. It just focuses light onto our retina. And we'll learn more about that later, but the retina are actually dendrites of a sensory neuron. So that sensory neuron is going to carry the signal that it has detected from the light entering the eye. It's going to carry that signal to the brain. So those are sensory neurons that collect information about the outside world and deliver it to our brain. Here I have a little, well, in that corner, I have a little dotted line there just to kind of have a little bump out box area there to say, I'm summarizing the brain here, but the brain, since we learned about that in the 2.1 series of lessons, is incredibly complicated and has so many different parts here. You could really go to town going into saying like the occipital lobe processes the information from the eye, and then it sends that command or that information to the frontal lobe, and your frontal lobe makes a decision on that based on memories from another part of the brain, and then you make a decision about what you're going to do, and then you have to create a command. So you have to go to the motor cortex, and then the motor cortex is going to send that information down to the cerebellum, and the cerebellum is going to integrate that movement. So that corner of this little flow chart is really, really dense. So here we're just going to say, though, in this flow chart as a bare minimum expectation is to say that you understand that the brain is composed of interneurons or association neurons, and that brain decides on the response and creates commands. You don't have to go into each individual little section of the brain like we learned about before. You can just say the brain. But anyway, coming down diagonally, we are sending those commands and the decisions that have been made by the brain, we're sending them to the spinal cord. And the spinal cord, also part of the central nervous system, has interneurons or association neurons that carry those signals all the way down to motor neurons. So the dendrites of motor neurons are going to receive that information from the axon terminals of interneurons in the spine, and then it is going to carry that command down its length all the way down to the muscles. So the motor neurons send the signal to the muscles, and then the muscles are going to move, and it's going to, in this case, pick up the leg to crush the cockroach. The same situation, the same system could have been used to pick up the cockroach and take it outside. It could have been used to jump up on a chair. It could have been used to run away, whatever. Whatever your choice is, the same pattern still exists. Again, recapping, we start by collecting information from the outside world, meaning sensing, seeing a cockroach, and our sensory neurons bring that information to our brain. No decisions are made by the sensory neurons. They just detect photons of light. Then the brain and the interneurons make decisions and generate commands about what should happen and how it should happen and what the body needs to do. It sends that signal down the spine, still using interneurons because that's part of the central nervous system, and getting all the way down to a motor neuron, which is going to take that command out of the central nervous system into the peripheral nervous system, down the length of the motor neuron, all the way down to a muscle or a group of muscles, which are going to receive that command and carry it out. In this case, picking up the foot and stomping it on the cockroach. So hopefully you understand that arc. We'll learn more about reflexes specifically, and we'll learn more about the reflex arc, but the same situation applies here. That 3-step or 3-phase process: collect information, analyze and decide, execute a command, is how the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system work together. So hopefully this little flowchart helped you solidify that idea, and your flowchart matches something along these lines. If you have some questions or need help about anything, always feel free to reach out and ask.